दक्षिणास्य समारंभा शंकराचार्य मध्यमा अस्मदाचार्य पर्यंता स्मर्या गुरुपरंपरा श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरलोकशंकरं शंकरं शंकराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशव वामन कृष्ण पाण्डुरङ्ग आनन्द परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शङ्कर सद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति।
Jai Shankar, and welcome everyone to this 10th session of Mulaqat series. KSA for many years, since its inception in 1911, they were more into organizing cultural programs and various get-togethers. All these years, we have the KSA has been running many activities, and the more focus was on the magazine. Sometime in 1969, the first business convention was organized by KSA, and subsequently it was followed by a youth convention to basically to generate a database of the entrepreneurs. There was an entrepreneur workshop subsequently in 1995, and the KSA-CSN initiative was launched in 2015. So since 2015, this has been an initiative which has basically to promote, to help youngsters setting up their own business, helping each other in their business activities. So this Mulaqat series has been one of the areas where which helps. It's a knowledge sharing series, and here we interview people who have accomplished themselves in various fronts. So welcome Rahul ma'am and Jiten ma'am for this 10th series of Mulaqat. I would now request Rajan ma'am to introduce the guest.
May I briefly come in here to slightly expand on what Mahesh ma'am had.
Yeah, sure.
Rajiv. Thank you for giving that initial introduction of CSN. I'll just add a couple of points very quickly. Like Mahesh ma'am said, this is the 10th Mulaqat that we hold now with the accomplished AMCHIs. The objective being to inspire a community to do better and better in whatever field they have chosen to take up. At KSA-CSN, our main objective is to help every AMCHI do better in their own fields, but with a special focus on entrepreneurship. We want to create an entrepreneurial culture within the AMCHIs, and also, promote more AMCHIs and help those who are already into business. Now, there are various ways in which we are trying to do this. One is, of course, the Mulaqat, which is both inspirational and educative, where high achievers share their struggles and their stories, their insights, the successes, the failures, all very useful for the rest of us. And then we have regular knowledge sharing workshops where domain experts are invited to share their expertise in their respective areas. This we have every month. The Mulaqats also we aim to have every month, though we have not been completely successful on that. Then we have created a website in which we invite all Amchi entrepreneurs, whatever they're doing, whether they're professionals or practicing or manufacturers or service providers, whatever it is, we invite them to register themselves so that any Amchi who requires a service or a product can find out which a fellow Amchi is providing this service. So there are already over 180 registrants on that. And through this medium, I would request each one of you all to identify one entrepreneur who is not yet listed and encourage him or her to go ahead and list on that website. I also request all our fellow Amchis to use this website to locate somebody who can offer whatever service or product you want. And to make it much more easier, we have launched what is called, what we call the Bhanap Yellow Pages. You know, this is something that we share on WhatsApp. So you just type in whatever you want. Let's say you want an interior designer or, CA, tax consultant, whatever it is, and it gives you that entire list of all Amchis who can offer that to you. So I would request each one of you to maintain this a copy on your phones and to use it as often as possible. So that was about the Bhanap Yellow Pages. And then for the existing entrepreneurs, my colleague Gautam Amladi Ma'am is very sincerely and passionately conducting two kinds of interaction events. One is where a lot of entrepreneurs get together and introduce themselves to the others who are present and ask for whatever help they need in forms of connects, and also declare whatever connects they can provide. This is being held twice a month. And then there is a one-to-one where two entrepreneurs get together for a more intensive, get to know each other kind of meeting. So these are the other two initiatives that we are being conducted regularly. So I would request, now through this meeting, I would request offers to conduct workshops and also to write articles for our CSN pages in the KSA magazine. We have Mahesh Maman started. It was started in 2015, but the real momentum has begun after it was, taken up very seriously by KSA in 2019, and all this has been possible only because of the blessings that we received then and continue to receive from our Param Pujya Swamiji. Now, with this brief introduction, I would request Rajan Ma'am to introduce our guest for the evening, Jiten Divgi, and also our interviewer, Rahul Chandawarkar. Rajan Ma'am, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Friends, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce two important personalities in the Mulaqat session today. These two personalities are Mr. Rahul Chandawarkar and Mr. Jiten Divgi. Rahul actually does not need any introduction since he has already participated in two sessions of Mulaqats. When he interviewed his brother Praful Chandawarkar of Malacca Spice on 24th February 2020 and Mr. Shiv Arur of India Today on 19th December 2021. However, for the benefit of those who may not know him, 58 years of age, Rahul is a B School graduate and worked in the corporate world for about 10 years and another 20 years in the field of journalism. He's a recipient of the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award in 2009 for excellence in journalism for environmental reporting. Between 2012 and 2015, he was the editor of Sakal Times newspaper. Rahul has also made a documentary film, Building Bridges, featuring the sights, sounds, and people of Lahore, Pakistan in 2012. A talented photographer, his photographs, Colors of Goa, were displayed at Malacca Spice, Pune in 2017, a few of which I happened to see on Facebook. They are indeed outstanding. Rahul, who lives and works in Goa, runs a popular YouTube channel called Fenny for the Soul. He's a media publicity consultant and an Ironman triathlete, having successfully completed 6 triathlons in the last 4 years. Our chief guest for the day today is Mr. Jiten Divgi. Jiten Divgi completed his mechanical engineering from BITS Pilani in 1984 and subsequently completed his MS in manufacturing engineering in 1986 from University of Massachusetts in Amherst. He now leads Divgi Torq Transfer Systems Private Limited, Pune, as its managing director. The company is a leading automotive transmission or drivetrain designer and manufacturer in India, catering to a wide range of automobiles, both in India and the overseas, which include Korea, China, Thailand, Russia, Europe, and the USA. I'm also told that they are in the process of manufacturing an automatic transmission system for automobiles indigenously for the first time in India. Earlier, between 1990 and 1995, Jiten was the executive director of the Transmission Systems Division and International Operations of Divgi Metalwares Private Limited, Pune, after which he took charge of Divgi Torq Transfer Systems Private Limited, formerly known as Divgi Warner Private Limited. Divgi Warner was one of the first joint ventures formed when India set foot on the economic liberalization path in 1991. In addition, Jiten is a multifaceted personality. He plays the tabla and is very knowledgeable about Indian classical music, Indian philosophy, and the Maratha history. With this brief introduction, I now hand over to Rahul to proceed with the mulaqat, during the course of which we shall get to know Jiten and his experiences better, which I'm sure will be a motivating force to many Bhanaps, particularly the youth, leading them to a bright future. Thank you very much, and over to you, Rahul.
Yeah, thank you, Rajan Ma'am, for this lovely introduction. Yeah, so I'll kick off by inviting Jiten on the program. Yeah, good evening, Jiten. Can I see you? Yeah, that's great. So
hi Rahul.
Yeah, hi. So introductions have been done, so everyone knows who Jiten Divgi is, and we're very happy he's on the show with us. And I'm really going to kick off by asking him the very first question. We'll just kick off by asking you a question straight away, and by showing a visual also, which I find very interesting. Let me just get down to that. So Jiten, the photos in front of us are of your paternal uncle Ramnath Divgi and your dear father Bhaskar Divgi. So they are the two men who really started Divgi Metalwares in 1965. Manufacturing gears and screw machine parts. Now they had customers like Kirloskars was, I think, their first customer. Then Tatas, Mahindras, Escorts, Siemens, so many big guns. So what were the business lessons that you learned from these two gentlemen? That's what I'm very keen to know.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me and see me properly, Rahul?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like to do is just make a few remarks about the history, sort of to set the context, because I think the lessons that we learned and we continue to learn derive from that background. So, the family till my father's generation like most Bhanaps, we were an agrarian family based in the village of Divgi, which is across the river Agnashini from Kumta. And like many other families of that time, we were caught swept up in the problems of the depression of the 1930s. And Anna, as we called him, because he was the oldest brother among 6 brothers, in National City Bank. I think he got his first lessons in global business, finance, trade, working with the Americans in Mumbai at the time, and used that eventually to build a trading business starting in about 42, 44, in the middle of World War II. So you could say that we were born with a sort of global mindset. He was trading mainly with the Middle East at that time, but very shortly thereafter, as India gained independence in 47, he branched out into trade with Europe and the US. And at that time, it was a little bit of export, but also importing various commodities into India. My father really was the first, you could say, educated, trained engineer in the family. And whatever capital the family had garnered till then was put to use. And actually, the initial manufacturing business was based in Harihar, supplying components and services to the Kirloskar machine tool group. Later, the family relocated as the Kirloskars were expanding in Pune. So that was, sort of the background, and the lessons that I think they at that time business there were no B schools. Business had to be learned, hands-on through the University of Hard Knocks, as I call it. But I think through my Anna or Mahantu, or as we say in Konkani, he was a great conversationalist. And people in the community who knew him, because he was very actively involved in the mart as well, probably remember him as a great sort of raconteur, as we say. He also had a remarkable memory for details and dates. And it's a pity that this was not put into the form of a book, because he would have made a perfect partner for an author like you, Rahul. Anyway, so a lot of what I learned with him, really going back to when I was a student. And so because he had kind of branched out from the little village of Divgi, come to this big town, a big city of Mumbai, started dealing at a very young age, from the age of 19, 20 with the British and the Americans. And Mumbai was a very global city back then. So he brought this very global mindset to business, and an innate entrepreneurial kind of daring to life and to business. So I think that the first lessons we got was precisely that, that you had to be bold and sort of audacious and branch out. And even as I was coming out of school, he encouraged me to leave the comfort zone of Pune and go to Pilani in North India, which was a little unusual. And he said, unless you get out and see the world, you won't learn and you won't expand your horizons. The same thing happened when I was leaving, then graduating from BITS Pilani. And he said, to America, what's kachi? Because you will not then, get this opportunity again, and you'll see the world, and that in itself is going to be one hell of an education for you. So that was a big morale booster, and I sort of that helped me in my efforts then to go to the US and complete my education. I continued working there for a while before coming to India. So those were some early lessons. But along the way, and he passed away in 2002. And unfortunately, my father was stricken with a paralytic stroke early on. But so my sort of lessons I learned with him were more when I was studying and literally growing up, because we used to see him plug away, work very hard. And I think through his life, he kind of set down a lot of lessons, just some things that I want to touch upon. And I think we learned very early on that we are sort of custodians of an enterprise that had to be preserved and passed on to the next generation. So the sense of trusteeship of an organization was ingrained fairly early on. And maybe that had something to do with sort of the value system that our community has. They also sort of set a work ethic, and that business, to run a business, and we have to remember that the 50s and 60s were a very hard time in India. The environment was not very conducive to business. So that business was a 24/7 endeavor, and that body, mind, and intellect had to be applied 100% at work. But along the way, that didn't stop them from, having a little bit of fun along the way. And that came in the form of continuous experimentation with new ideas, both in terms of product manufacturing that we were in, but also experimenting with new markets. So the principle was don't stagnate, keep moving, keep roiling the waters, and try out new ideas all the time. Some other points that I want to touch upon, I think, is the word character, integrity, values were often used, and my Mantu, especially was very particular about this. He often repeated this old adage that I seem to remember, and which was that he used to say, when money is lost, actually nothing is lost. When health is lost, maybe something is lost. But when character is lost, everything is lost. So that was very important to him. Integrity, the always honor your obligations and promises that you make above. That was very, very important. And I learned these lessons hands-on with him along the way. Maybe because of the times that they came from, extremely hard times. Frugality was a quality that I think the previous generation showed the way. Today, if the word frugality is bandied about and is a fashionable term in Indian industry, but we learned that very much hands-on, and at least the early years and the memory that we have of the way our business was built up, I think will continue to stay with us. Along the way, and this especially I learned from my father, I think he was a very compassionate person. And especially towards the weak, disadvantaged, he went out of his way to help people. And it probably again had to do from his childhood and the way he grew up. When his father had died young, he grew up in Sirsi, didn't come to the big city till later in life. And so he had a very natural compassion to people who were economically disadvantaged and generally weak economically. So that, I think, is also stayed with us. But finally, I conclude and say that the message was, learn to take on the world with confidence born of knowledge, experience, and competence that you build up continuously. So continuous learning and take on the world. So it is gratifying that a business that started in trade, global trade, in the middle of World War II, a family enterprise, not this manufacturing business, that today we are back on the global stage, and there's some satisfaction in that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Jiten, for that very comprehensive answer. Gave us a lot of insights into the family. So in 1965, Jiten, Divgi Metalwares, even in their early years, supplied this 3-speed transmission system, to the Mahindra Willys Jeep. And what is of interest is that that same Jeep was used in the 1965 Indo-Pak War and propelled with a gun. It blasted the Patton tanks, no less, and many other Pakistani tanks. So it must have kind of what was the impact within the company for this this kind of an experience?
Yeah, I mean, to be sure, we actually did many different things. This was just one part of the business, but obviously because of the emotional appeal, this was what remained as a kind of icon of what we did. And I'm sure we'll get to it later in this conversation, but the first geared parts, in fact, the very first geared parts that we manufactured were parts of the very famous BorgWarner T90 gearbox. It was a 3-speed gearbox designed by BorgWarner for the Willys Jeep in the 1930s. The Willys Jeep was designed in response to a tender that was floated by the War Department, now known as the Department of Defense, or Ministry of Defense of the United States government. And there were many companies, Bantam, Willys, Ford, that bid on the tender. But this particular, what we now know as the Jeep, was selected by the US government, and BorgWarner had designed the 3-speed gearbox. Later, when Mahindra's licensed this gearbox came to them as part of that license, and some of that component manufacturing came to us. This, of course, I learned many years later, and when I connected all the dots. But it's rather historically interesting that we started life in the transmission business, manufacturing parts of the famous BorgWarner T90 gearbox. And we continued manufacturing those parts till almost 1995. So India was really the last bastion of that very legendary gearbox. It was, that was the history. It obviously, I learned first about it from my father, and he would often playfully kind of and talk to me and my brother Hiren about it. And of course, he took great pride in that we were part of this iconic platform, utility vehicle or platform, you could call it. What is interesting, Rahul, is that inspiration sort of stayed with Hiren and me, and we continued to be associated through, especially through Mahindra, but also with Tata, in many defense programs. And it is a matter of great pride for us today that India's next generation light tactical vehicles that I'm sure Shiv Arur that you interviewed last time is very familiar with. We are on many of those programs at both Mahindra, Tata, but also with Bharat Forge in India. So, and the first tranche of the commercial production has actually started. So you could say this is India's response to the need for a Humvee-like vehicle of the American Army. So this is now designed by the first, you could say, Indian Humvee is going to be a Mahindra vehicle. And we have designed and developed independently the 4-wheel drive transfer case for that. So it has, the genesis of this whole process and the original inspiration goes back to that, what I call the Little David Jeep that took on the Patton tanks, at the Battle of Asal-Uttar in September 1965.
Fantastic. Thank you. So Jiten, I'll come to BorgWarner because you just spoke about BorgWarner, and I wanted to talk about that. BorgWarner had some relationship with your company, Divgi Metalwares, but more importantly, I think I'm just suspecting that because you studied at the University of Massachusetts, you worked in the US of A, and and when you came and became a director at Divgi Metalways, one of the initiatives I think you took is to associate or rather have that JV or joint venture with BorgWarner. And 1995, I think it became Divgi Warner. So tell us about this wonderful relationship with an American company and what were the lessons learned?
Yeah, so that I mean the story of how all this came about is actually one, as they say, of serendipity. It's sort of I didn't set out to form this joint venture. I mean, things just happened. But basically, what happened was in 1990, I had just come back, and I was going to the US on a trip to look for export markets. This was actually before the liberalization of July 1991. I had identified some 15 or 16 companies in the US that I was going to visit. And it just so happened that I met a very creative and visionary individual at BorgWarner in Detroit, who had the vision to see what the potential of India and China was going to be, believe it or not, in 1990. And he, along with his deputy, actually were instrumental in helping me form the JV. It's interesting that, I think that is one of the biggest lessons also, that you have to be up and about and interacting with the outside world. And once in a while, you'll meet some amazing people, right? With who end up kind of transforming your life. So initially, it was an arrangement to, obviously BorgWarner was very experienced. This company is still around. We are no longer a JV. The JV lasted for about 21 years, but it was founded in 1901, and it predates Ford, GM, and all the iconic American automotive companies. BorgWarner invented automotive transmissions as we know them today, both the manual transmission and automatic. And this goes back to the 1920s and 30s. So it was a matter of, we were totally excited that we were going to, we had this chance to work with this icon, So if you could say, Intel inside on computers, you could say BorgWarner inside. That is the kind of stature they had in the global automotive industry. BorgWarner had taught the Germans how to make automatic transmission after World War II, and the Japanese in the 1960s. In fact, Toyota's supplier is called Aisin-Warner. They don't use the Warner name now, but it's called Aisin-AW. And AW refers to their joint venture with BorgWarner. So that was the kind of company that we had the chance to work with. So what these people said was, let's get a marketing relationship going. You try and export parts to us. And if we do a good job, then that will give us the foundation to then negotiate a joint venture agreement. So that's how we went about it, in a very deliberate, systematic fashion. And so from the initial contact in 1990, we eventually formed the JV, signed the agreement in January of 95. So it took a good 4 to 5 years of exploration and negotiations. But what we as an organization, and many of us individuals in the business, learned from the Americans, which I think is very critical to Indian industry. Above all, we learned hands-on what technology-led innovation is. We also learned what marketing, selling, sourcing with a global mindset means, because we deal with all, the global parts of the automotive industry. We also learned, the Americans, that's the home of capitalism, which means financial discipline and the use of modern tools in financial management. This, we learned, is inextricably linked with technology. Technology cannot be divorced from finance. and that was, I think, one enduring lesson we learned. We also learned world-class manufacturing and quality management tools that the Americans had picked up from the Japanese. Absolute state of the art. So today we are actually able to make parts with 0 ppm, no complaints with customers for several years. We learned, this was our learning in interacting with the Americans, because America is a superpower because they bring certain things to the party, and dealing with them teaches you, contemporary methods of negotiating complex legal contracts and technology transfer. And along the way, I learned that our Indian financial professionals and legal professionals are second to none, because they helped us manage this rather asymmetric relationship between an Indian SME and a behemoth, which was this Borg Warner Fortune 500 company. And then generally managing global relationships and collaboration. Because Borg Warner was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, we got exposure to world-class standards of management information reporting, financial reporting, governance at the board level, how to put a board together of world-class directors, and general cutting-edge principles and practices in human resource management and organization development. Because without that, you can't have the bandwidth to grow and expand. So in short, Rahul, we learned what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School. I can tell you that.
That's a good one. Thank you. Wonderful. So, I mean, of course, when as a journalist in Pune, I've come to your factory and you've spoken about, the Borg Warner days in the 90s. So I'm of course aware of that excitement. So I'm coming to this when you were Divgi Warner in the 90s, early 2000s. You all were the first Indian company to design that 4-wheel drive for Ford Motor Company, So a huge American company like Ford. So you all did the first 4-wheel drive. And then later, it was used by Tatas and Mahindras and all. So tell us a little about that excitement, because it was a, path breaking.
Yeah. So we were quite conscious that the partnership with Borg Warner would give us a launching pad to go global. And the Thailand part was actually just one dimension. Along with that, we were also in China. In fact, even before we got into Thailand, we were in China. And we were actually helping Borg Warner China in training, in teaching them how to make Borg Warner products. So in fact, for about 4 years, I was on the board of directors of Borg Warner China at the request of, which was professionally for me, a tremendous break. And I learned a hell of a lot about the Chinese when India really had no idea what China was all about. We were, of course, also exporting to the US at the time. And then this Thailand opportunity came about, which was very interesting because Ford Motor Company back then was in a joint venture with Mazda, and they were making a vehicle which did not have an automatic transmission. So Ford decided to bring in an automatic transmission from its plant in France. So we had this rather interesting, let's say, configuration of players that was developing in Thailand. The vehicle itself was built in Thailand for the ASEAN market and markets beyond ASEAN as well. The vehicle engineering was going on at Ford's Tech Center in Australia. The engine, because these markets needed diesel engines, the diesel engine was coming from the Mazda plant in Hiroshima in Japan. The overall business was being coordinated from Detroit. So Ford first approached Borg Warner, and then they found out that the particular configuration of this product was very close to what we were making in India for actually the Tata Safari back then. So one really sharp guy who was on our board then he connected the dots and he told me, Jiten, this is the opportunity you've been waiting for. And rather than do the low volume stuff in the US or Europe, and at that time, BorgWarner did not have facilities in Korea or China. So India was a bit of a pioneer back then. They said, this is your opportunity. So the way this thing unfolded was, this was, like somebody said, like an American, you know, Americans are given to Americanisms, so he called it globality. You know, it was globality at its best. You know, just imagine you had Japan, Australia, France, America, and along with that, the transfer case was going from our Pune in India. So it was, I mean, the rush of adrenaline was unstoppable. You know, it was an amazing program. And I think among 230 odd tier 1 suppliers at the Ford plant, we were the only Indian company. And it was a matter of great pride because we had the initial technology came from the US, but the product was practically entirely designed and configured in India. It was developed in India. It was designed to go on the most popular Ford automatic transmission, which was built both in France, in Bordeaux, but also at their plants in Detroit, 2 or 3 plants around Detroit in the US. So we were on a global platform in that sense. And I think the credit goes, you know, to our people in our organization, our suppliers in India, and just the raw talent of India. So I got a very, very early insight into what India could bring to the global party. This is back in 2003, 2004. We started production in 2006, and the program ran all the way till 2013, 2014. And we essentially helped BorgWarner crack the ASEAN market open. So there were many firsts there. You know, it was the first Indian company to design a transmission for a multinational. We were the first Indian company to break into Thailand, into ASEAN. And we were probably the first Indian company to take advantage of the Indo-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, which the government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee had negotiated. And I still remember Arun Jaitley was then the commerce minister who had negotiated and signed the agreement. And we were able to land our products duty-free into Thailand and make it very affordable for Ford. So we did a pretty good job. I don't think we had any complaints in the 7 or 8 years. And financially, it was a tremendous success. So we, you know, it was, I think, a tremendous lesson into what India could do, and gave us the self-confidence to do more ambitious things in the following years.
No, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you again for a very comprehensive answer. Talking of self-confidence, I think, you know, my next question is leading to that. You know, now that you are Divgi Torq Transfer Systems, you are now going to be India's first company to really, you're working on India's first automatic gearbox, you know, along with your German associates. So tell us more about this exciting work.
Yeah, so this DCT has been like a bit of a holy grail, you could say, or and also a labor of love for us. So the genesis of this actually began, you know, I would say 2003, 2004, when BorgWarner, our joint venture partner then, invented and launched this new revolutionary technology in Europe. And what it was they took a manual transmission and automated the shifting, taking advantage of you know, just a unique invention that they had done, which what they call dual clutch. And without getting too technical, I'll just say that, you know, when you drive a car with a 5-speed gearbox, you have odd and even gear. So 1, 3, 5 would be odd, 2nd and 4th would be even. So what the DCT does is it has 2 clutches. The odd gears are on one clutch and the even gears are on another clutch. And so the shifting is extremely fast. It's like in less than 200 milliseconds. And when you drive the car, so this photo was taken at our tech partner in Stuttgart. So you can see the different automatic transmissions there. So that, we said that is when we first started learning about automatics, the way BorgWarner was developing them. And I remember taking the top brass of Tata Motors to Germany then, which was sort of the home base for this technology. This was like autumn of 2004. And that's when the process started. Of course, India did not have the ecosystem. We were ahead of our time then, but it has taken all of, all that time since then, almost 17, 18 years to reach this point of, and all along the way, we were sort of making sure that the market was developing some sort of a critical mass. Today, the state of maturity that the Indian automotive industry has reached has made the environment conducive to bring this technology in. And all the work we put in along the way has helped us. What has also happened is technology has diffused into the global markets. And my simple sort of hypothesis at the time was, if Western companies are coming to India for its markets, then Indian companies can go to Western markets for technology, because technology and markets are two sides of the same coin. And that, I think, was borne out. And we were able to tie up with small boutique engineering firms in Germany. And the confidence that we had of having successfully put a JV and run a JV for 21 years with BorgWarner was a huge advantage. And I think in the automotive industry, we had a reputation that we were BorgWarner's partners. So in this photograph, the gentleman that you see in the green shirt, he was part of the BorgWarner team that invented this particular type of automatic transmission. His name is Dr. Ebinger. And in 2011 or so, he left BorgWarner to go work with this, become the CEO of this boutique engineering consulting firm in Stuttgart. And he contacted me a few years later, and then, over beer and Wiener Schnitzel in Stuttgart, we we struck a deal.
That's a good way to strike a deal.
Yeah. Anyway, so we are here. The product is still under development, and COVID unfortunately put a bit of a crimp. But I'm happy to say that Tata Motors, that has always enabled us to make that next graduation, is sort of our anchor customer and is helping us in this endeavor.
Fantastic. So all the best with that, new product that you're coming out with. So now I come to the fact that, you have been doing business with the Americans, the Russians, and even the Chinese, So one is that I have some photos of your Russian associates. So let's start with the Russians. I want you to briefly tell us a bit of the strengths and weaknesses of these three nationalities and what you picked up from them.
Yeah. I think I have to start with a disclaimer. I mean, this is my sort of personal, so it's, the views obviously are subjective, and as they say, one set of experiences doesn't make for wisdom in that sense. So with that caveat, I'll go and tell you what my experience was. One is, of course, that over the last, I've been at this now almost more than 30 years. It's with the passage of time, things evolve. And what was wisdom maybe 25, 30 years ago is obsolete. Things have changed. So we need to bear that in mind, Rahul. But broadly over this canvas of time, I would say there are some broad observations that I would make. What I've learned is that America's biggest strength, okay, and why that country is so, I studied there, lived there, is they are extremely resilient by being very adaptable. And their institutions of higher education are head and shoulders above the rest of the world. And because America is such a magnet for talent from all over the world, the rate of invention and the way ideas are deployed in society, in business, it moves at an electrifying pace. And therefore, it is no surprise that a company like Tesla and the whole revolution of electrification of the automobile is being driven by the Americans today. And they were really the people who showed the way. Although I must say the Chinese probably have caught up and may even overtake them. So I think America's, I would say, biggest strength is that. As far, with the Russians, I would, we've done business 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so that's the team from UAZ, which is a company in central Russia on the Volga River, the town of Ulyanovsk, which interestingly is the hometown or the birthplace of Lenin. So kind of a pilgrimage place for the old Bolsheviks. So my observation about the Russians is that by dealing with the Russians, I actually developed a deep appreciation for how strong and resilient India is. Because the Russian economy is, in that sense, a little bit like India. They have our cost structure. The ruble is somewhat like the US, before this crisis happened. My observations, of course, pertain to the pre-war conditions. The Russians struggle. There is no culture of entrepreneurship. Unlike China and India, Russia does not have a vibrant, a small and medium scale industry. Everything has to be huge. So it's a slow moving Leviathan, the Russia. Everything there is slow and pondering. And so I see India can play a huge role in the future. Russia is an untapped market for us. There is a natural goodwill that prevails between India and Russia. And while, of course, Russia has its strength in space and military technology, the ability to make things affordable, cost-effective, world-class quality, I would say India is way ahead of Russia. The way our salespeople, our finance people, manufacturing were able to innovatively engineer solutions for various issues that cropped up as we tried to develop business in Russia, I think taught me the tremendous reservoir of creativity which is there in our Indian people. As far as I think the Chinese are concerned, we have to be very concerned. China is an incredible country. When I started doing business there, they were learning from Indians. I remember bringing a Chinese delegation that wanted to learn the art and science of making state-of-the-art diesel engines from Tata Motors. And today, China, they were barely making, over 1 million units then. Today, China makes around 25 to 27 million cars a year, almost double of what Europe and the US make. They have moved so fast in the last 15 years. It's unbelievable. So, and my sense is the Chinese are highly entrepreneurial. They can make deals very creative, very innovative. They think out of the box. And it is a tremendous challenge for India. But you can negotiate with the Chinese. Despite the geopolitical tensions that have bedeviled India and China relationships, some of our best business associates continue to be in China, both customers and suppliers. So long term, we've also realized what India's strength is. So when it comes to small, medium volumes, highly engineered products, a complex integration of diverse knowledge streams, India is pretty damn good at it. Our things like project management, because of the use of English language as a global medium of communication in the global automotive industry, India has a decisive advantage. And our capabilities are absolutely acknowledged by the Chinese. So in the Divgi TTS team, we have no fear of the Chinese. We revel in the way we do business with them, I would say. So we know what our strengths are. We have a pretty good idea of what their strengths are. And we make sure that we are working around that and not necessarily coming and getting steamrollered by a 40-ton truck, as they say.
Fantastic, fantastic.
And just one concluding remark. The other country that we have worked with is Japan, and Japan and Germany. And Japan, India can learn. The Japanese management techniques is what India needs to learn. Their ability to motivate people at the grassroots level is unparalleled. And that's exactly what India needs. If we as a country have to mobilize and apply the millions of people, right, in India that need to be employed gainfully. So Japanese man management, according to me, is really fantastic. It's the best in the world and most suitable for India. As far as Germany is concerned, their mechanical inventiveness, is what keeps Germany ahead. It's the only country in the world that has a trade surplus with China.
Wow, that's a very interesting answer, because we almost got a whole lesson in international business cultures. Fantastic. So now I'm breaking off away from business, and because you got so many interests, so I'm going to tap on Indian classical music, and I'm going to really show you Yogesh Samshi, the tabla maestro, is your cousin, and I'll show one visual of Yogesh, and so I mean, our Amchi community knows Yogesh very, very well, but and also let me play a little, because you play the tabla, I'm going to indulge in showing a video clip, and for the larger audience, it's actually a collaboration, a JV. It's not Divgi and Warner, it's Jiten Divgi and Rahul Chandawarkar. So I'll play that little video clip where Jiten is playing the tabla and I am singing. So you all get an idea of his tabla playing more than my singing. And let me show that. So Jiten, my question to you really is that you learned the tabla when you were in school or college, I guess. And so what is so special about that instrument, and how did it give you a window into Indian classical music?
I think you're going to putting me on the spot, as they say, because I have no qualifications to to say anything on classical music. There are many eminent people in the Bhanap community. So I can just sort of offer some lay, I'm just a person who appreciates music, and even tabla, I'm still an amateur. I don't accompany any serious classical programs, but I think as I've gotten along in age, I've realized that I'm happy that I learned tabla. I really enjoy playing it. And I was a member of the music club in Pilani, and many of us alumni have reconnected after many years. So it also becomes a great way to bond with my old buddies from 30, 40 years ago. But I think what I generally kind of along the years that I've reflected on this, my lay observations on this is that whether it's the tabla or Indian classical music, I think it's not just Indian classical music. It is actually music that is heritage of the world. Because if you think about it, since I travel a lot in Europe, I realized that what we call Western classical music is actually a very modern phenomenon. If you go back, it really flowered only in the 18th century, right, 1700s. If you go back to the time of when Mia Tansen was in India, there was practically no classical music in Europe, maybe just very basic. Whereas our music is, millennia old. Its origins are in the Vedas, and I'm sure there are we have a lot of musicologists, I know, in our Bhanap community who will of course can amplify on that. But therefore, the sense when I travel around the world and see culture, and the thing that I'm struck with is that, especially in Northeast Asia, Korea, China, Japan, for them classical music is Western classical music. And really the only other form of music that stands up to what goes off as classical music is Indian music. Everything else is just folk. And whatever little I've read and learned and understood, our music is extremely scientific. It's scientific in the sense that it is highly sophisticated intellectually, very nuanced, and requires tremendous rigor to master it, rigor of a lifetime. Of course, in addition to being gifted in music. So it is a phenomenal heritage that I think we have. And what, that photograph you showed, Rahul, was when I had invited Yogesh as a chief guest at one of our supplier conferences. And I did that because my sort of point was that in the area of manufacturing and products, India doesn't have a global image. Where India has a phenomenal global brand is in these endeavors, in cultural endeavors. And perhaps, that's where we need to take inspiration from and find our own authentic, original Indian way of doing things to build our brand, if not in our lifetime, but maybe future generations. But we can certainly start the process right now. So to that extent, I think I do see a connection with not just music, but many other cultural endeavors where India clearly, in my humble experience, traveling across the world, India, we should not be apologetic or diffident. India has a phenomenal heritage, and we need to build our brand in the Comity of Nations. This will eventually help our national image and the image of small companies like us. I struggled hell of a lot in the early 90s because of the negative image of India. And if we can do our bit to build the image of the country, I think that's a great way of contributing to our national endeavor. And I think our music certainly is part of that. Just another quick observation. I feel that, and that I have a liking for history. What I've learned is that our music is a phenomenal national integrator. So from the Punjab, the Pahadi regions of the Himalayas, from UP, Bengal, of course, Maharashtra has a disproportionate, Northern Karnataka, Goa, going even to Tamil Nadu. I mean, I think the day is not far that you could have somebody, just to make it a little melodramatic, a Tamil Iyengar being the torchbearer of maybe Agra Gharana. It's not inconceivable. And so Indian music is one of those cultural unifiers of our country. Although we have this bewildering diversity of language, culture, but our music certainly unites. And let's not forget that one of our greatest exports is Bollywood. And the most memorable music of Bollywood is underpinned by Indian classical music. It is a fact. Of course, today, when shelf life is very short, but what is, the music of the 50s and 60s, which was anchored in classical music, Madan Mohan, S.D. Burman. You and I can relate to that. So, Indian classical, that's the sort of appreciation that I think I've developed over the years, and those are the observations from my very humble view I would offer.
I'm going to... Can you hear now? Anyway, sorry. So sorry. Okay, so I'm only hoping that we got people got a gist of Jiten's tabla playing. I hope people could hear a bit of his tabla playing. That was the intention. Anyway, the last and final question really to Jiten is, Jiten, you have been a history buff also, and so am I. So, but then, and you have been you've done a lot of reading on Maratha history. So tell us a little about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. I mean, why do you find him most interesting? And what are the three things that you have picked from his book?
Yeah, so I think just a few quick observations in the interest of time. I think I would say to understand modern India, you have to know Maratha history. And what's interesting, Rahul, a lot of people may not be aware, but there is an intimate connection between our community and the sweep of Maratha history coming right up to the 20th century. You may not be aware, but there was this historian by the name of Govind Sakaram Sardesai, who wrote this epic, monumental sort of magisterial work on Maratha history spanning 8 volumes. I'm not sure if it is still in print, but the last edition of it, which I bought, it's written in the original Marathi, was published by the Bhatkals of Popular Prakashan. And Bhatkal Sadanand Mam, who my dad and uncle knew very well, I remember told me, because I went to him and said, I want to read the English version, and where would I get it? And he said, if you want to understand Maratha history, you should read it in the original Marathi. So I actually went and bought the 8 volumes. I had never read anything in Marathi, although having grown up in Pune, but I went to an English school and had never mastered Marathi. Fortunately, I think our Hindi standard was high. So I could read. I sort of taught myself eventually speed reading in Marathi and read those 8 volumes. And I then realized that to understand modern India, you have to know Maratha history, because the modern India, its geographic contours sort of mirror what the Marathas did, of course, later on the Sikhs as well. But those parts of Mughal India that the Marathas brought under their paramountcy remained with the Republic of India. Those parts that the Marathas lost to the Afghans after Panipat and the British in Bengal became Pakistan. And it's a quirk of history that the Ratcliffe line does not run parallel to the Vindhyas. And the entire swath from Afghanistan to Bengal did not become Pakistan. If that did not happen, and the bulk of Hindustan came to India, the credit for that, according to whatever I've read, has to go to Bajirao Peshwa. There's no doubt about that. And this is not, I think, understood, certainly not by people in North India, and very few, I think, even in Maharashtra. And I think the year 2000 was the 300th birth anniversary of Bajirao Peshwa, and there were no celebrations. anywhere in India to commemorate India's greatest warrior ever. You know, he is matched only by Genghis Khan and the Duke of Wellington in not ever having lost a battle in his career. Never. And so that to me, I think is, you know, there's a little ditty. I think it was in one of those 1950 Marathi movies. And the opening lines of that sort of Maratha warrior song go, Shura ami sardar amala, kaya konachi bhiti, deva desa ane dharma pai, prana ghetala hati. And I just want to say, you know, there's a certain environment in the country right now that when deva, des and dharma is forgotten, you get stories of Nalanda and Kashmir and Goa files. And when Dev, Des, Dharma inspires thought and action, you get stories of Guru Gobind Singh, Shivaji, and Swarajya. I'll just leave it at that. But coming to our own Bhanap community, one is, of course, the great contribution done by popular Prakashan. You know, Bhatkal Ganpat Mam and then his sons Sadanan Mam and Ramdas Mam. Amazing contribution, I think, to Maratha history and the documentation and dissemination of our history generally for India. And I, you know, the other aspect is all of us have our Kuladevatas in Goa. And the Jirnodhar of all those temples was done by Shahu Maharaj and the Marathas. If they were not there, I wonder what tragic course, you know, our sense of identity would have taken. Shivaji tried very hard to subdue Goa and bring Goa back to his Swarajya, but he didn't succeed. But where he did not succeed, Sambhaji succeeded in at least lopping off the eastern half of Goa, which is why all our Kuladevatas are near Fonda or Ponda. The original locations were on the west at Keloshi, Shantadurga, Mangeshi. So I think we owe a historical debt to the Marathas. And I remember it kind of touched me when I saw that little dedication plaque at Shantadurga saying that the Jirnodhar of the temple was done by Bajirao Peshwa and Shahu Maharaj in the year 1738. If you go inside the temple, you will see tributes to the great divans and generals of the Holkars, the Gaikwads, and most of all the Scindias of Gwalior. So Saraswat's Brahmins sort of oiled the machine of diplomacy, accounting, and legal, whatever work had to be done at the time, of North India, especially under the Scindias, who were the most powerful Maratha potentates of the time. So there you have it. That's the way I look at it. And the genesis of all of this, of course, was Shivaji. I think this aspect of our history does not get adequate attention and appreciation. And I think it's important that we rediscover this if India truly is to find its authentic self and voice again as a country and as a power in the world.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree with you about the contribution of the Marathas, certainly, without a doubt, and very well put. So I think we are open to questions from the audience. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. So let's see, I think we should have got some questions. Rahul, you can let me check any questions.
Rahul, while you're checking, may I ask one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, please, Rajiv, straight away.
First of all, Jiten, that was really a very interesting session, covering such a broad spectrum of insights from business to classical music to history and how it all comes together. Thanks a lot. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Well, particularly one comment, about Japanese man management being the best in the world and what is particularly suited culturally, I suppose, for us. Can you expand on that a little bit? What is it? What is the intrinsic quality of Japanese man management which you would like to see develop in India?
Sure. In the interest of time, I'll just make my comments brief. I think one of the problems that we, in the last 30 years that I saw in the factories in India was one of motivation and bringing a sense of purpose, right, at work. Because when you have that and you have highly engaged, motivated people, right, it can make a world of a difference to your economic endeavor.
Yeah.
And the Japanese approach to work, they do that with an economic end in sight. But those of us in India who have some awareness and background in our own spiritual philosophy, okay, can connect to what the Japanese are trying to do. So their whole approach is to make work more interesting, more enlightening, and make people feel that they are contributing something meaningful. And essentially, that's what I found out. It may be as simple a job as packing stuff, into a packing box, but they will make it very systematic. People's suggestions will be taken. The ability to engage people in work with body, mind, and spirit is amazing. And I had read a lot about the Japanese way of working, but nothing prepared me for when I actually encountered it in Toyota. Toyota is one of our biggest customers globally. We supply Toyota in the US, in India, and we are now beginning to work in other parts of Asia as well. And when I visit their plants, I once remarked to my Japanese colleague there that I said, when I walk through Toyota, it's a very spiritually uplifting experience.
That's an interesting observation. Okay.
And I feel completely energized when I see, the clerk, the helper, the cleaner, they work with a sense of motivation that I do not see anywhere else. They are not perfect, but these are my personal sort of observations. And I felt that if we can bring this approach to the municipal worker, the bus driver, in India, the engine driver, we can make a world of a difference if this is emulated systematically. So it's not surprising that Prime Minister Modi has a great admiration for this aspect of Japan.
Right. Thanks for sharing those insights. Like you said, it requires a lot more time than this, but give us a glimpse of what you meant. Yeah, thank you so much.
So, Jiten, we got a first question from Ashok Saunshi. Ashok ma'am wants to know how your company is gearing up for the EV market, with the electric vehicles coming in. How are you all gearing up for that? And even this whole technology of 3D printing, is that making any impact on your, workflow?
Sure. I'll quickly answer that. So, BorgWarner, when we were a JV with BorgWarner was the company that solved a particularly stubborn problem at Tesla on the very first Roadster model that Elon Musk was working on. And the guys who solved this problem at BorgWarner, both of them were very close personal friends of mine. One of them is actually an Indian from an IIT Madras guy. The other guy, of course, American. So very early on, I'm saying, this could be 15 years ago, we had a ringside view of what was going on when Elon Musk was actually bootstrapping Tesla Motors. And because of that, we inherited, you could say as a legacy, a lot of the technology for transmissions for electric vehicles. And over the last several years, we have been working systematically towards both in terms of the product development as well as the manufacturing. Since India was kind of behind the curve, we decided to go overseas and see what business we could get. And we were fortunate to get some work from Tesla when some of the Borgwarner guys landed up at Tesla. So on the Model X, we make the differential gear that goes in their four-wheel drive version. And that business, it had its challenges initially, but last 3-4 years, we've been doing it pretty flawlessly. Interestingly, the most of the manufacturing happens at our rural plant in Sirsi in Karnataka, and just the final finishing is done in Pune. So this is another example of how rural India, can step up to the plate, as it were, and meet global standards. So all this development has enabled us to get ready, and I'm very happy to share with you that we have won the contract to make the transmission for all of Tata's electric cars that will be coming. And we are mobilizing capacity up to 100,000 units a year. So electrification, friends, is coming, and it is coming like a tsunami, because we have to be ready in another 2 years with the capacity to make 100,000. And this is just the beginning. We are just addressing the small car range. The bigger car range is yet to come. But I have no doubt that the Tatas will lead the revolution in India.
Wow!
And the fact that we are developing the gearbox for them puts us in sort of pole position. And if we are able to do that in India, and we are recognized as Tata's transmission supplier, I'm sure it will have a significant rub-off effect globally.
Yeah, in the international markets here. But this is very exciting news, Jiten. Congratulations. So there is another question from Krishna Chandawar. Krishna Chandawar wants to know, it's a related question. This manufacture of EVs, what impact would it have on the conventional gear transmission systems?
Excellent question. I think it will be nothing short of a humongous disruption. Today's automatic transmissions are extremely complex devices, whereas the design of the mechanical transmission that goes into an EV is quite simple and straightforward. It has a different configuration, but the manufacturing standards are of a much higher precision standard for EVs. And the work that we've done with Tesla actually has sort of put us in that category. So we are aware of those precision standards, and they are a couple of notches, or maybe several notches higher than the precision and accuracy standards that you need for a more conventional transmission. But yes, the disruption will be tremendous, and the supply chain is going to shrink because you just have less parts, and there will be a complete reorganization of the value chain as electrification expands in the global industry.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer. So I think I don't have any more questions. Rahul, do you have any more questions coming up from the audience? I can understand, because it's been quite a technical talk. you kept it very layman-ish, but still, so people, some people might have got a little, overawed by.
So in the meantime, Jiten, can you recommend a book for all of us on Japanese man management, At least give us a starting point.
Yes, I would recommend actually a couple of books. One would be The Toyota Way by Jeff Liker. And he's a professor, I think still is there at my alma mater, the University of Massachusetts. So Jeff Liker has sort of written, it's a masterful and very comprehensive account of the Toyota Way. And if you read it, he's written it very well. It's very readable. So that's one book. And the other book it's not directly on the Japanese way, but you can appreciate that book a little better by reading this other book, which is Peter Senger's Fifth Discipline. The art and practice of the learning organization. That's another seminal book, I feel. I read it many years ago, and I find myself sometimes rereading it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Sure, please.
Please go on.
Yeah, Jiten, I'm quite impressed with the success of your company, and I think to many Bhanaps like us, Divgis are very well known in the automobile field. In fact, even when we had taken a delegation to USA in the Michigan area, Detroit, I think your company's name was being talked about as a tier 1 supplier. But then based on your talk, you will agree that to bring a company to your size and success really requires a lot of hard work. I mean, how you got it from your father downwards to you, and how you contributed to its growing. Now, one of the main aims of our CSN initiative is to see that many Bhanaps come into business, and we have many more companies like yours in our Bhanap community. So what would be your advice to the youngsters in our community? Because during our time, when we did our engineering, the first thing is you look out for a job. Going into business was totally discouraged. Things were totally different at that time. Today, with liberalization and things being so easy, I feel that it is much easier to do business in India. But my batchmates who went to US and did business, they have been very successful in USA because things were transparent and much more easier. So what would be your advice, and how could you mentor through the KSA-CSN platform to our youth and the middle-aged people who could go into business and build organizations like yours?
I think like Rahul, again, you've put me on the spot. And to be honest, I never sort of thought of myself as a, businessman, least of all a manufacturing entrepreneur. And I think I'm in this field because of my, father and uncle who had the gumption to do what they did. And I think I'm just fortunate that I've been able to preserve and hold it together. But I would say that actually compared to in some sense, compared to the 70s, and you may find this a little paradoxical, compared to the 70s and 80s, starting a manufacturing business now in India as a first generation entrepreneur has become really difficult. Because the friction in our system, and I think I won't say anything more than that, is still there a little bit. And now we have global competition. There's a proliferation of competition because things have opened up. And so unless you have some insight and starting point, branching out into becoming a manufacturing entrepreneur is, I would say, a little hazardous, which is why we see a lot of startup ideas, I think, in India, in the service sector, because the entry barriers are lower. This industry is knowledge intensive, capital intensive, in some ways labor. So it requires a sort of multi-dimensional. And in my instance, I was lucky that, I had a foundation on which to build. So I think my short answer to that would be, in general, it would be very difficult to but I would be happy to look at individual cases and perhaps some counseling can be done that way.
I think that would help to a great deal.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
But in general, I would say that today's industry requires a very artful combination of HR, finance, and marketing, in addition to whatever domain knowledge that you bring. I think Indian entrepreneurs have not paid attention. Of course, if you have had a finance background, then it comes naturally. But because Pune has been, an area of small-scale manufacturing industry, the general what I find is that not enough attention is paid to bringing professionalism into finance. And if you pay attention to costing and finance, and sort of professionalize that area first, it goes a long way in strengthening your business.
Yeah. Rajiv, should we take just one last question, because we're already about 95 minutes,
Yeah, sure. It's been a very interesting evening, and if there are questions, let's take them.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, Jiten is okay with that.
Yeah. No,
Jiten, I think possibly the last question, but Anand Pandit wants to know, is this PLI scheme introduced by the government of India, a great incentive?
I think it is for large firms that have the bandwidth to operate the rigmarole of government of India. Frankly, I have never, set much store by all these blandishments that the government offers, because they are here one day, gone the other. It's much better to build your business on fundamentals that are more durable. So we are aware of that. In fact, the current PLI scheme for automatic transmissions and EV transmissions are going to be in our favor. And we are looking at it, but I personally am not sort of impressed by all of that.
Wonderful. So thank you very much. I think we can conclude really, because we have had a fair bit of questions, and we had a good session. I think almost 98 minutes. So thank you so much, Jiten, for this wonderful journey, right from where your uncle and father began, right up to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, no less. So yeah, I know. I had warned, I think, Rajiv, that we are going to have a whole lot of very interesting topics. Because Jiten and I go back to almost school days and early college days. So we were from the same city of Pune. So thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Rahul, and thank you, KSA, for this privilege and opportunity. I appreciate it very much. Thank you again.
Yeah. So I think Kishan, it's over to Kishan now, no?
No. It's I would request Gautam Amladimam to.
Oh, Gautam, sorry.
Official vote of thanks, but before that, my personal thanks to Jiten and to you also, Rahul, for very artfully bringing out all this interesting information, and Jiten for so generously sharing your experience garnered over decades. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jai Shankar. Rajiv ma'am has already covered what I wanted to say, but usually a vote of thanks comes with a tinge of small regret, because that signifies the end of a very interesting session. And today's session has been, I think, to use a few adjectives, enlightening, educative, and inspirational, which is the main idea behind organizing these mulaqats. Jiten ma'am, your story has been very inspiring, to say the least. And for CSN, I would, at the sake of repetition, you said money lost is nothing is lost, health and character. Great character builds great trust. And trust is what CSN is all about. Unless we get to trust our people we don't like, wouldn't want venture to help out each other. So again, building great character. And Secondly, is one thing you said about was up and about in meeting the outside world, which is again what symbolizes the ethos of CSN. Where you go and out meet people, and the more people you know, the better you bond with people is how you help each other. And a small audacious request, if feasible, you can take a look at the yellow pages and see if any of these bhanups would entrepreneurs would fit into your vendor list parameters. That would be a great help to CSN members also, and maybe a source of encouragement that something concrete is coming out of CSN. And thanks a lot. Thanks are due to Entod for the technical, the whole transmission, and KSA, Praveen Ma'am, Kishore Ma'am for the encouragement that they have given for the CSN initiative. Mahesh Ma'am now is leading us. Rajiv Ma'am has been a great actually, the CSN thing started when Rajiv Ma'am started taking interest in this. Though I've been shouting it for many years, but since Rajiv Ma'am came into the picture, it really started flowering. And to all the people who have attended, I don't know how many people, and if there are any CSN people attending, members attending, then they should listen to it again. There will be a recording available on YouTube. So thanks a lot, everybody. And thanks again, Jiten Ma'am and Rahul, for a wonderful session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Sabha samapti करते हैं.
Yes. नंदन्तु साधका सर्वे विनश्यन्तु विदूषका अवस्था शाम्भवी मेस्तु प्रसन्नस्तु सदा सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात्. ओम शांति शांति शांति. ओम नमः पार्वतीपतये. हर हर महादेव. Thank you. Jai Shankar.
Okay.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you. It was nice. It was nice to listen to the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Really interesting, yes.
So